and welcome to another week of Real True Facts, the realest, truest podcast out there. My name is Nancy Drew.
And I am Stone Phillips. Not that one.
Not that one. Hey, Stone. So today we are going to switch it up a little bit on the show. Last week we were asked to do an episode about psychic stuff, which was kind of broad.
Psychic stuff.
So we've kind of been circling the runway, as I like to say, with a lot of psychic stuff on the show, with topics that we've covered, like ghost communications with the medium we talked about with poltergeist. We've got the Mothman that sent out psychic communications. The witnesses claim they received psychic communications from that. And so we're going to go in a little bit further depth of what that means to be psychic and have psychic stuff.
Yes, that is one way to put it. And our guest this week is actually, I believe it is you, Nancy.
Surprise! It's me.
So due to your, as mentioned in some previous episodes, your psychic sensitivity, lends you to psychic experiences or psychic stuff.
Yes, this week you don't have to look any further than your own backyard. It is true. I am the guest today, and I know I've kind of hinted at my psychic abilities in previous shows, so I figure I might as well just speak on it. You know, inquiring minds want to know, so I'll do my best to describe my experience and what it means to be psychic.
Right. So Dr. Semor and I will kind of take the stance as the interviewers and try and probe the matters at hand, and we'll kind of go from there.
I'm excited for that. It's not every day that I get to be the expert and kind of have Dr. Semor listen to what we have to say. I guess he's going to be the student this week, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah, that's one way. Definitely
that's one way to
put
it. Not to insult him at all.
Right. And so we'll be talking about. So are we gonna? Do you think we'll hear some personal stories, some personal details, or what makes you in your opinion, what makes you the best guest for this psychic stuff episode?
Well, I've had these abilities for a really long time. Ever since I was a kid, I've had a few instances when I was a kid that made me realize that I was able to perceive things beyond our normal senses. We've got our, the 5 senses, but then there's the 6th one out there. And so when I realized that I had that, it was something that I'll get into, but I think it makes me qualified. I think being psychic is very subjective. I think there's a lot of different ways you can be psychic and tap into those experiences. So I'll tell you as many personal stories if you want. I can tell you about my process, whatever you want to know. I mean, I say I already know what you're going to ask me, but I'll just let you ask me anyway.
So, yeah, we'll get into psychic stuff. But first...
And now it's time for...
Send in the clones. So this is a new segment. We're calling it Send in the Clones, a bit of a play on words there. And we're addressing one of the issues that we see or may not see. You may not be aware, but there are clones all around us. It's been around for about, 25 or so years. Let me see how my math is.
Yeah, I believe the first clone was in 1996.
Right, so you may be familiar with a little sheep, but it didn't stop there. For instance, Paul Rudd, he is a clone. Mm-hmm. He looks young, he acts young. That's because that corporeal form is still young.
Yes, it continues to regenerate. It's very similar to how teleportation works. When you send one cell to another side or you regenerate it, the original one dies, and then the one that takes its place is a copy, but it is a younger copy.
Right.
Yeah. So makes sense. That's why he looks so good. Another clone is Eminem. Eminem is a clone. I think he was cloned in 2006, which would explain why, as he ages, he looks so different, and his music has changed.
Sure, of course, yeah, because any normal human or artist would look exactly the same, say the same things, make the same music. They wouldn't change over time. That's how we know that he's a clone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And they say that the clone has the same bone fragments as the original, so they use the bone fragments to make the new clone.
Right. That's just one way to do it. I'm sure there are more. Stephen King, the writer. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if this was all one of his own experiments. Maybe we can get Mr. King out here for an interview, but he is in fact a clone. No one actual being could write that many books and stories.
Yeah, and that would explain why he keeps writing things. Most really good, prolific writers are dead. They died already, but he is still here. He's still making books and screenplays and novellas and things like that. And so the only reason I can think is that he is cloned. So that's good that you know that.
Right. Yeah. The stuff that he wrote a while ago, that being has died. So that's why it's good.
Yeah.
And he continues the cycle.
Yeah. Very similar to how Eminem is. Well, I don't know. Gloria Estefan.
Right.
She's a clone.
Right. And I think we saw that the first time she danced. I think that was pretty evident.
Yeah. I mean, you can't be that beautiful and have that much energy all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there has to be more than one of you to accomplish that.
I mean, the song says, she said, "Get on your feet. If you were old and tired, you wouldn't be able to do that."
Right. And notice it's get on your feet, not get on your foot.
Right. Both of them.
Right. And possibly even 4 or 6.
Yeah. It could be anyone. It could be anyone's feet.
Right. Multiples. Not just her 2 feet, but her 4 feet, her 6 feet.
Well, that would stand to reason she has an entire army of herself. And she's like, she's calling her clones to action. Get on your feet.
Right. Right.
The rhythm is going to get you.
Sure. The rhythm has gotten many. And speaking of a call to action, the entire team of the 1996 Bulls.
Yeah.
Clones. How do we know? Well, I don't think there's any doubt or assumption that needs to be made there. How does one team win that many championships? It's not possible. So
they're so in tune. It's like, you could say the coach, you could say Phil Jackson was a good coach, but you got to have good stuff that you're working with too. It's like they have to be genetically engineered, which actually might be a whole other thing.
Right. And of course, and we can't, Michael Jordan, for instance, there were many Michael Jordans, a lot of them died. They worked so hard. They just, wore themselves out. So you just had to keep making new ones. And
there was at least 6 of them, right?
Sure. Yes, at least. And it's a common practice with athletes of this caliber. One isn't gonna last.
Yeah. How could somebody play a sport and be in a movie at the same time?
And underwear commercials and a shoe brand and lifestyle brand. It's not possible. So it's almost strange. It's stranger to think that it was all done by one person.
Well, and he played baseball too. Remember, he played for the White Sox.
Right. One version did. Yes.
So that's one timeline, one clone that we knew about that did something other than play basketball.
Sure.
Which is so weird. The clone would make sense. Would you say that Michael Jordan's probably the most famous clone?
Well, I mean, that's a hard question because then we get into who's more famous because there are so many. I mean, Paul Rudd's pretty darn famous right now.
Super famous.
So it's that's a difficult question. We'd probably end up debating who's more famous more so than who's more of a clone.
No, I don't know much about this, but do you know if there is a way to test whether or not someone is a clone?
Yes. As a matter of fact, so we will next week we'll get into more details because as we get into topics on here on Real True Facts, we find that we could go on and on and on, and clones, and it gets so in depth that next week we will actually get into how to test to know if you or someone is a clone.
Oh, so you could even find out if you were a clone too.
Right. If you answer these questions, and because how else would you know if you're a clone unless
Yeah, you
someone
wouldn't.
told?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, we might be in for a rude awakening next week.
Right, and that's why we have to. I'd like to dedicate a whole episode to clones.
Let's do it. Let's do it. It was a segment. Now it's a show. This is the beauty of information. This has been
Send in the clones. So this week we are discussing psychic stuff. I know clones are very interesting, but we'll get to that next week. And we have our very own Nancy Drew and Dr. Semor, and I will be conducting a bit of an interview. Nancy, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
And Dr. Semor?
Yes, I am here as well. Yes.
So why don't we start things off, Nancy? You spoke a little bit about it earlier, but what makes you qualified to talk about psychic stuff?
I believe I'm qualified to talk about psychic stuff, or we'll just say psychic abilities, or extrasensory perception. I'm qualified to talk about these things because ever since I was a child, I've been having these experiences, and I pushed them away for so long. But as I got older, my abilities to sense the inexplicable, or to perform these acts grew stronger. And so I got to a point, I think probably in my late teen years or early 20s, where I just said, like, you know what, let's do it. Let's just go head first into this world here. And so I suppose I've been practicing these things and honing these talents for many, many years.
Okay, so you've been honing talents and abilities for many years.
Yes.
So Dr. Semor, she mentioned extrasensory perception. What are we thinking that might mean?
That's what I'm excited to find out. Is that I've done quite a bit of research in this field and the history of it, and in the more large scale impact on society, but had very few interactions with individuals. So extrasensory perception, and earlier you mentioned going beyond your five senses. What I have read about in so many cases, different things. What extra abilities do you have?
So there are a lot of different kinds of psychic abilities. Psychic is sort of like a blanket term to not only describe the abilities, but also to describe the person who has these abilities. And so it could range from being telepathic or being clairvoyant. You know, telepathy, you can read thoughts. Clairvoyance is sort of like how Eleanor Darkness is also a medium, so she can speak to ghosts. There's different ways that you can receive and interpret these messages. And so my area of expertise is that I would consider myself an empath. So I'm not really so much rooted in the, crystal ball kind of past, present, and future, which is something that people can do. But I am someone who feels other people's energy, be it a person who is alive or a person who has come before us and left that energy behind. So I can go into a building and I can touch the walls and kind of feel who used to be there and what energy or vibes that they left behind. But I'm also able to get messages from being around other people and feeling their emotions. They don't have to tell me what they're feeling. I can feel them anyway.
So it's a little bit less of communicating with the dead or the spirits and more communicating with the living or similar, but in a different way.
Yes, I can communicate with ghosts. I have done that before. I haven't done it a lot, mostly because it is something that I find stressful, so I don't do it a ton. But if I feel like I am called upon to communicate with a ghost and to help this ghost. I feel like they have chosen me to be the best person, or sometimes I say conduit, like I'm the best conduit for these things. And so I'll do my best to communicate with them. So I can do that. But I guess in my wheelhouse, I deal more with the living.
Wow. So, Dr. Semor, I want to try something here, but I want you to kind of oversee this and make sure it's as scientific as possible. I'm going to draw a shape on a piece of paper and see what Nancy says she thinks it is. What should we be looking for, Dr. Semor, when conducting this kind of test?
What's important here is trying to keep in this case, since we are not in the same room, in the same location, we're not so much worried about our body language or our facial features. So it's really important to keep your verbal communication as even keeled as possible, as to not tip anything off here. And also, if I'm understanding Nancy's abilities correctly, you're really going to need to maybe not control, but be aware of your own emotions. If that is the major sense that she is picking up on, you need to be aware of how you're feeling when you're drawing this, so that she can experience that in the most effective way.
Okay, so Nancy, let's see here. All right, I just drew a shape, and I'm transmitting that. Well, I'm looking at it, so I'm thinking about it. What did I just draw?
Well, from what I gathered, you were going to draw something really simple, but then you thought, no, I'm going to draw something harder, so it's harder for me to guess. The shape I believe you drew was a polygon.
Polygon. Is that how many? I drew a stop sign. I'm not sure if that's a polygon, but because originally, okay. That's I originally was going to draw a square, and I thought that's too easy, so I kind of crossed that out.
My initial thought was that you were going to draw a trapezoid, and that you were going to pick something with more sides to try and like trip me up.
Trapezoid. That's the one with the how many sides does that have?
4, I think.
4. So yeah, it was a sloppy square. So I could definitely see trapezoid coming out of that.
Octagon too. That's another good shape. That's when we're picking up messages, sometimes it's you get like a little mix of like the beginning, the middle, and an end of a thought. So you won't get the whole thing. It's almost like getting when you're talking on the phone, you're going through a tunnel. It's like you get some of the message and you kind of have to use some context clues to fill in the whole thing. So, I could sense you putting the pen to the paper, and then you drew something, and then it kind of cut out a little bit, and then the message came in that you were done drawing. So, then I just kind of have to fill it in from there.
Interesting. Okay. So, I'm trying to think of other possible ways to to display this to our listeners and viewers, so they can, be aware of the credibility here. A square and a polygon is pretty darn good. Have you heard of something called Mad Libs?
Yeah, Mad Libs.
So, Mad Libs. Blank went to the store and bought a noun. Okay. So, blank is going to be someone in this room. So you have a 1 in 3 shot, but noun, that is not so easy. So I'm writing this down now.
Okay.
So that people know I'm not coming up with it later. And then, okay. So, Did you feel anything? I just wrote the noun. Blank went to the store and bought a blank.
Yeah. Well, I'm sensing that, first of all, the sentence is going to have a subject and a predicate.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
The first noun is going to be a proper noun. And the second noun is going to be like a person, place, or thing.
Yeah, it's store.
Yeah, so we know that store. So what they bought is not going to be a proper noun.
Correct. Yeah. So what vibe are you getting here? I just wrote two things down. Blank went to the store and bought a blank.
Dr. Semor went to the store and bought a microscope.
So how do you know? How did you know that I wrote microscope though? Like no one goes to the store and buys a microscope, so I thought it might trip you up. But I mean, if
I order all of my microscopes, so to think that it would come from a store that each of you would have independently come up with that, I understand why you would choose that, as you were saying, Stone, to trip her up, but that Nancy was able to come up with that.
I don't know what more proof we need for our viewers and listeners.
So I was right.
That's what I said. I don't know how. Dr. Semor went to the store and bought a microscope. That's not.
You know, an empath is someone who is highly aware of the emotions in the world and from the people around them. And it's almost, you feel them like they were your own. So when I'm thinking about people that I know or people I don't know, and I close my eyes and I receive my messages, and I feel their emotions like they were my own. So when I feel a need for something, sometimes I have to think, do I really need this? Like earlier today, I thought, I thought, man, I really need a microscope. And I was like, no, I don't. Like, why would I think that? And I thought, you know what? That feeling does not belong to me. That belongs to someone else. But I'm going to hang on to that because later I'm going to figure out exactly who that belongs to. And so when you asked me that, I had already knew that someone today needed that object. So, say it's like you find the shape and you find the hole and you have to match up the shapes. And sometimes it takes a few tries, but it's there and you match it up.
So sometimes you have the shape before the hole.
Yes. Sometimes I have a shape and I can't find a hole to put it in.
Wow. Okay. So, this is getting even more interesting. Why don't we take a quick break? I have to rest my brain. I feel like I've been mentally taken advantage of a little bit here. I'm trying to figure this out. So why don't we take a quick break and come right back talking about psychic stuff. We're back this week with our very own Nancy Drew, myself, and Dr. Semor interviewing her due to her psychic abilities. Now, we've confirmed those abilities with some basic tests that are pretty difficult to fake, to be honest. I don't know how, we're not in the same room or even the same probably the same state. Again, we won't confirm our exact locations. So I'd like to possibly get down to maybe more details. You said this developed or started in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it has always been there my whole life, and I think children are very in tune to things. I think, sometimes children can be very creative, and sometimes we chalk that up to like, oh, they have a very overactive imagination, or if you have a kid, they draw you something and you're like, oh, what's that? And they're like, oh, that's the man that lives in the attic, and you're like, what? But
sure,
there is some truth in that, because it is very possible that children are very sensitive to messages because they haven't been really bogged down by reality yet. They don't have a lot of things in reality that are kind of, holding them down. Like, we have jobs, we have bills to pay, we have stresses, we have responsibilities. Kids, they're kind of live wires when it comes to emotions. And so I think being an empath, you kind of maintain that sort of childlike ability to access your emotions very easily. And so, when I was a kid, I remember I would have things happen to me around the house that I couldn't really explain, and no one really believed me. If I saw a ghost and I thought, oh, there, I saw like a man. It looked like a man walking up the stairs, and I turned around and no one would be there. And
So
it's
how
like,
old were you when you first noticed these things?
I was probably, I don't know, maybe around 8 years old when I started noticing these things.
Mm-hmm.
I was,
Was there a time, like you said, it's very common, and in my reading and research, it's been very common with children. Was there a time where, I forget what phrase you used previously, but where you kind of embraced or realized that you were someone special, or that you were going through a change, and that you were maybe there was something new about you in this ability?
yeah, I mean, I always felt these things as a kid. I think it became more pronounced, more prevalent when I was a teenager, maybe, sometime around 14, 15 years old. I'd always known that I had these abilities, but maybe it was with the onset of puberty or something like that. But I was able at that age to sort of see more messages. And when I say messages, people receive things in all sorts of different ways. I get a lot of flashes in my mind of colors. Could be auras. If sometimes it's like the saying, when people get angry, they see red. It's like, okay, well, that's a message. So you would see colors, or I would see symbolism, or I would just get a feeling in the pit of my stomach, like, if my stomach hurt really bad, or I was feeling like, super angry or something like that. It's like, okay, I'm receiving a message. What message is it? Is it my own? And so I think when you're young, it's very easy to confuse those things and kind of chalk it up to just, being a moody teenager, but it could be something else as well.
So you're in high school, college, whatever. Something had to, there have to be some weird stories or incidents where maybe things went wrong, went right. I couldn't. If this happened to myself, I have to imagine I would be trying to, play the lottery, or, read the mind of this girl I liked and was trying to ask to the prom, or, how did this affect you in your personal life, and what kind of real situations and real, examples came out of this?
Well, when you're younger, you have less impulse control. And so it's very easy to not use it for evil. I've never used it for evil, but sort of like think, oh man, like I could probably get this boy to like me or something like that, but I think and this is going to sound very far-fetched, but I think the moment for me that I knew that it was different was when I was really sick. I ran a really, really high fever, and I was very, in and out of everything. I felt very weak, and I was laying in bed, and I had a voice come to me, and it seriously sounded like this very gentle little voice was sitting inside of my ear, and the voice said to me, "Go ahead." And I remember I sat straight up in bed, and my fever broke, and I wasn't sick anymore. And I just remember I collapsed in tears, and I was crying, and I felt this wave of emotion. I felt like, why am I crying? I'm not sad. And I think that in that moment, that was sort of the instance where my abilities to read these messages that are previously hidden from the regular people in the world around us, that was the moment that I could actually access those and differentiate that from those of my own.
So it was a spirit said, "Go ahead," or a person? What was this?
It was an angel.
An angel on earth from the heaven, celestial?
It was not of this earth. It was from a different, realm completely. It was not here. It wasn't a person. It was an angel.
And what do you think they meant by, you said, "Go ahead"?
Mm-hmm.
What did they mean by that, you think?
It felt like they were giving me the strength to not only overcome the illness, but also to not be afraid of who I actually was. Because there were so many times in my adolescence or coming of age years where I just would push down any sort of messages. I would push down my feelings. I would, chalk it up to, lunar cycles or something and write it off. But it was in that moment, it was like, no, like, here's the validation you've been looking for. Here's this trauma we're going to put your body through. And now that you've come out on the other side of it, it's like, do you finally understand? Yes. Now go ahead.
So what did you do immediately after this? Did you go get ice cream? Did you,
Well, I was bawling my eyes out, and I remember my mom came into my room, and because I'd been sick, she had been like, kind of checking on me occasionally, and she goes, "What's wrong?" And I said, all I could say was, "I saw an angel," and she started crying too, and the dog came in and jumped up on my bed, and we just kind of sat there and just sat in silence and really like had a moment. And I fell asleep, and when I woke up, I was perfectly healthy, almost to the point of wondering if I ever was sick to begin with, and was it a dream? But you get that feeling deep down. It's like, no, that wasn't really a dream.
This experience, it sounds very intense. That it came along at a certain time, very emotional time. That there was a connection with another female living in close proximity to you,
Yes,
experiencing those same emotions. Do you feel that there is kind of ups and downs in your ability? Do they come and go? Are they more intense at some times, or is this like an every day of the week?
No, not every day of the week. I mean, I would say maybe like it's only super intense for like 3 or 4 days, and then it goes away. Sometimes it's not there at all. But having a connection, being an empath and having a connection with another person, sometimes it does make it stronger. Sometimes they kind of sync up with you. Sometimes, it's interesting. I'll ask you, Dr. Semor, from a science standpoint, is there any sort of explanation? Because I always just chalked it up to having an experience with an angel or just being sick, and because my body was so run down, I was able to kind of tap into something else. Like, scientifically speaking, I know I'm being interviewed, but I'll ask you, is there like a scientific explanation for why I would have felt something like this?
No, those are great questions, because I know you're trying to learn more about it, as I'm trying to learn from you. The nearest thing I could tell, your body is weakened. Some of your senses, some of your abilities are not there, and the nearest experience I can liken it to, because this is not unique to humans, it goes on to animals, but like when an animal, or when one goes blind, their hearing, their smell, sense of smell is more intensified. So when one part of your body, either physically, psychologically, could be from an illness, could be from something just being drained from your body for whatever reason, something else may well up and become stronger or more intense, or more perceptible, near as I can tell from your experience.
Mm-hmm. It sharpens, yeah.
Yeah. So with your experiences, have you found, since that was years ago, do you find your abilities most intense, or most able at locations you are familiar with, or in new locations where you are less familiar?
It's a great question. My abilities are stronger when I'm in a new place. If I'm at home or if I'm with people I know, I'm very used to those energies, and I'm used to those emotions, and how to deal with the people in my life. And like when you live with your parents, you get to know how they feel about certain things, what their likes and dislikes are, so you can kind of differentiate between your opinions of things versus that of like a spouse or a kid or something like that. You know what they like and what they don't. When I'm in a new place, that is when the senses are a little bit more sharpened, because being around a stranger or tons of strangers, I'll get this like overwhelming kind of like a bombardment of emotion. And so I'll feel a lot of things at once. And I think a lot of people would chalk that up to like a social anxiety kind of thing, but I don't have social anxiety. So what I'm feeling is someone else's emotions, and I am just like a little sponge. I'm absorbing all of this foreign energy and foreign messages from various different things. And so when I am in a new situation, or I'm in a new building or something like that, I do find that those abilities do become stronger, almost sort of like a defense mechanism.
So I'm just recording all of this for myself, kind of Venn diagramming it here. So
Yeah.
we've got two scenarios here. I need you to kind of bear with me here
Okay.
as I'm trying to learn. Okay, a familiar person in an unfamiliar location, or a familiar location with an unfamiliar person. Where do you feel the most?
Where do I feel the most psychic, I guess?
Yes.
Right. Where do you feel the most feelings or emotions? Where do you feel the most?
Well, that's fascinating, because regardless of who I'm with or where I am, if there is an unfamiliar aspect to it, I will feel that strongest first. So if I'm with someone familiar in an unfamiliar location, I'll either get the messages from the location, or I will get the new emotion from the familiar person, because either way, it is new and it's different. So if someone familiar to me is feeling something new, that is unfamiliar and therefore stronger. So I guess if you're going to do a diagram, if you're going to have your like intersecting, circles, I suppose in the center, it would be unfamiliar location, unfamiliar person. That would be where my abilities are the strongest.
Mm-hmm. So
Now, if both places are familiar, then I might not have that side of my brain switched on, or I may have dampened it a little bit because I don't have anything new to expect.
when we're studying psychic abilities of all sorts, I have not had the pleasure before tonight of studying an empath, but a lot of times we try to categorize the ability to perceive something as either precognition, perceiving something that will happen, or postcognition, perceiving things that have already happened. Where do you and it seems we don't have a psychic term for the ability to perceive what's happening, because that doesn't fall into the psychic realm traditionally. But when you are reading into somebody else's thoughts, emotions, feelings, obviously that is an option, that you're perceiving exactly what they're perceiving as they're perceiving it. How often do you feel a feeling before someone else? How often are you experiencing it as they are? And how often are you experiencing something that maybe happened in the past for someone to kind of fill in the blank? I think we alluded to this earlier with when we had holes and blocks and shapes to shove in and out there. But where do your abilities fall?
I think the easiest thing for me is to feel things that have already happened, and then just sort of interpret those messages as you will. So I'll say, for instance, if I go into an old building we'll say, like in Chicago, there's lots of historic buildings, a lot of buildings in the 20s and things like that. We'll say I'm in Union Station in Chicago. If you are in Union Station, there's a lot of people that have come through. So if I go in there and I'm able to touch the wall or, sit on a bench that maybe someone else sat on, and because a lot of it has to do with touch. If I touch the armrest of the bench, I can tell if someone had been sitting there and what they had been feeling. So it's like a woman sat here and she was very sad. But it can go as far as like a woman was sad and she sat here, but I'll get a glimpse of what she wore, and so I'll be able to know like, oh, this in the 1960s, a woman in a green hat sat here, and she was very sad that she missed her train. And it's like in that time, it's like, okay, what do I do with information like that? There's really nothing to do, and so it's like a fun little movie. It's like a fun snapshot. That's something that's very entertaining to me. But then there's also moments where I'll meet a real person and I will interact with them, or if I shake someone's hand, lots of times it has to do with me touching someone. If I shake their hand, sometimes I'll get a glimpse of their childhood. Like, oh, they really used to like to play with this one neighbor, and I can see them running in a field. I can see that. And that will sort of influence how I speak to them. So if I know that they enjoy certain things as a kid, I can kind of infer that like, oh, maybe they still have, they like to have fun, or maybe they like to play golf. Like they still like to be outside, but maybe those things have changed. So it kind of helps me connect with people a little bit more. What was the other part of that question?
Well, I think you answered it pretty well, and it brings up the question regarding post cognition. I mean, if say I know it's mostly physical, but say you're watching a movie, do you ever have? Can you ever tell what they were feeling when they were shooting that particular scene, or how does that ever confuse? Does fiction confuse this gift, or yeah, that's interesting to me when maybe someone is, something has been recorded in the past, but you're watching it in the present. Yeah.
Well, I will tell you just from watching movies that everyone who has ever made a movie has been so incredibly stressed out. No one is ever having a good time. And so if you can...
Okay, so as an empath, you feel that stress just kind of just oozing, dripping off of the screen.
Yeah, because you see what's in the shot, but I can feel what's outside of the shot. And so I can feel the crew members getting very stressed out, and maybe the two leads didn't like each other. It's very hard to separate myself from what's going on in the screen and the narrative versus how the actual, because those are real people. Like, actors are real people with real emotions. And so sometimes it's hard to differentiate between that. It's like I can't enjoy movies because I'm just like, man, everyone was so stressed out. Like no one was happy making this movie.
So just like Union Station, it doesn't necessarily have to be the present where the emotions reside.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting, in that time doesn't seem to be a limiting factor to your psychic stuff.
Yeah, none whatsoever. And if you think about it in terms of like a silent movie and people just conveying emotions with their eyes, it's like it doesn't even need to be verbal. Like I can see from an actor, I can see that Charlie Chaplin was pissed off when he made a movie. It's like, oh, okay, I get it.
Right, even though the movie was a comedy, not a dramedy or a pissed off movie.
Yeah.
So it sounds like sight is a big connection. Obviously, we've got all our different senses here, and you have an extra. You said that touch is a big one. Does taste, smell, is there any other connections there that
hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it all stems from sight. I wouldn't be able to do a lot of this if I couldn't see. And so I see something, I touch something, I've pretty much gotten the message already. I figured it out already. I don't really have a sense of smell. And so, and my hearing isn't that good. So it could be on that maybe my sense of sight. Actually, my eyesight isn't that good either. But but my sense of touch is very
I'm
good.
writing down a smell.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yes. Okay.
Go ahead.
I already know what it is.
Oh yeah, I can't believe that. Well, okay, what smell am I writing down?
Vanilla.
What? I drew a flower, a little vanilla flower, and then I put the beans and the stuff like
beans.
that.
Yeah.
I was trying to be jocular, and you just blew me out of the water.
Yeah. Well, some people would have drawn the bottle of vanilla extract, but
I'm not familiar with that type of thing. I'm a very I'm not sure what that would be.
Vanilla.
Interesting. So this is a bottle that has an extraction in it.
Well, yeah. Well, there, you have the vanilla bean, and then you have like the extract that you would use for cooking, right?
Okay, for I love cooking, and this sounds like a shortcut for me, so I don't have to use these beans all the time. Sorry, I'm just I don't mean to derail things. I just need to make a note of this.
You can just go to the store and buy
extract.
it there. Yeah.
Ask them for an extract of vanilla.
Yeah.
Very good. Excellent.
Thanks.
So
Thank you.
I want to take a quick break, but I want to pose this question, maybe give you a moment to think about it while we take our break. And what's the most recent event that maybe has been the most interesting or, crazy for our listeners and viewers, whether it was, did you come in contact with a famous person or a serial killer or whatever, and then you felt this immense insight or emotion or whatever, something kind of sensational for our viewers and listeners. So why don't you think about that? And if maybe you can come up with something, we'll take a quick break and be right back. We're back from a short break with our very own Nancy Drew and Dr. Semor. I am Stone Phillips, and we are talking about psychic stuff. And in this case, I don't know if it's called empathy as a noun or being a psychic empath.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you would just be an empath.
Okay, so yes, you're a psychic empath. And I posed a question before we took a break. For our listeners out there, if you had one particular incident, recent or not, where this, was very intense, just an interesting story.
Yes. Well, I think for any good story, you have to have a tiny bit of backstory. And I mentioned that my abilities grew when I was a child. And my entire life, from the time I can remember, I have had this one pack of tarot cards. I think a lot of times when psychics get started, sometimes they go out and they buy tarot cards because they think, well, I don't really know where to start, but let me see if I can interpret these messages some way. So a deck of tarot cards is actually able to give you sort of like a physical reference or help you make sense, because a lot of times it can be a lot of gobbledygook. You can get a lot of interference and things. So sometimes it just helps you focus. So I actually got tarot cards from the mall. I think it's probably circa 1998. I was with my friend Michelle. She lived across the street from me, and we had gone to the mall, and there was like a store in the mall called Natural Wonders. It was like a very metaphysical. You remember Natural Wonders?
I know Natural Wonders, where you could buy a pewter dragon holding a glass ball. Okay,
yes. It was mostly like pewter statues holding orbs, but she saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself, because I was kind of the shrimpy kid. I wasn't held back in school, but I was sort of held back because of my physical size, and so my mom always wanted me to wait till I was bigger so I could keep up with the kids.
They could hold you back for gym class. They
right,
wanted.
yeah, and it was embarrassing. So my friend Michelle, or Mishy, as I always called her. She took me to the mall one day, and she took me to Natural Wonders because we like to play with the rain sticks. And she picked up this deck of tarot cards that had a picture of the Sphinx on the deck. And she said, "I just think you need these." And I said, "Okay." And so she bought them. They were like $10 or something like that. They had to have been cheap because, it's kid money, And and I have the deck with me here. I have it on right here, and it's called the Isis Tarot, and it says an inner way to self-knowledge. And it's such a beat up box now because I've been using these cards for years, and I'm an old woman now, but I've been using these cards since 1998. And they've been with me forever. I keep them in the glove box of my car, so I'm actually not far off if I need to, do like a quick tarot reading or somebody needs help, and I'm like, let me get my cards. I actually consider them like psyche cards. They're not really like traditional tarot cards because they have like very interesting images on them. Like there's a sphinx, there's like triangles, there's a picture of a fox. Like it's just very like, very interesting images, not traditional. A few years ago, I was with my family, and they were looking to buy a house in Michigan. And we were looking at a bunch of different houses, and they took me with them. Excuse me. I didn't live with them at the time, but they took me anyway because I was visiting. And they thought, well, we could use your expertise just because I'm able to go into buildings and figure out, one, if they're haunted or not, and two, if there's any sort of like negative energy left behind. And they took me to this one house. I'll never forget it. It was seriously, the address was like 123 Main Street in this very small town in Michigan. It was like had train tracks running through the center, and that was about it. Maybe there was like an Elks Club or something.
Sure.
But that was it. And very cute house, like seemingly cute, almost sort of like a Hansel and Gretel situation where the house is made out of candy. And, come on in. So it's very like inviting.
But it wasn't made out of candy, the house.
It was not, but It was. The vibe was like it looked sweet, like it was a sweet little house that it would like draw you in that way, and then maybe something bad happened. But
sure.
But you don't know until you go in, and it was one of those things where I can always walk into a building and instantly know if something is bullshit or not. And this kind of took me for a loop. Like I could tell that something had gone to great lengths to make it seem like everything was fine. It was very like well put together house. But as you walk deeper into it, you could sort of see the metaphorical cracks, It was a very good house, like no cracks in the foundation or the walls or anything like that. I'm talking about like the psychic cracks, And so, we go through the rooms, and I start to get this like terrible sick feeling. And so, of course, the first thing I do is go in the basement because you got to start from the ground and work your way up. So I go in the basement and I look around, and it's one of those like dirt floor basements, and in the center of it is a root cellar, and it's like a wooden door with a very heavy metal like puller on there. And I try to open it up because I'm just nosy. So I try to open it up, and it doesn't have a lock on it, but something is keeping it shut. And I'm trying to open this, and it's like, okay, that felt really weird. And there was nothing down there, maybe like a ladder, some paint cans. I just I felt this like terrible feeling, but there's really nothing for me to touch in there. So like I couldn't really get a good reading. I could only go on from what I could see. And my mom said it smelled terrible, but I can't really smell anything, so I didn't really know. So we go back up, and it's like as we climb the floors of this house, everything just starts to feel just so sinister. And I go down the hallway, and I'm by myself, so I could finally like get a good reading. We ditch the realtor, so it's like you're by yourself, you're doing some exploring.
Sure.
And I'm touching the walls, and as I touch the walls, I feel just pain. I feel, misery. I feel just like, just overwhelming. It was almost like very heavy, almost like a panic attack, very heavy in your chest. And I go into this room, like a bedroom, and around the corner, and I open the closet door, and it's not a closet, it's stairs. And so I look up the stairs like it's going to go to like an attic or something, and the stairs are boarded up.
It's a door that leads to stairs.
Yeah, a door that leads to stairs, and you maybe look like maybe 4 or 5 stairs, and then you kind of like put your head in the door and you look up to see where the stairs go, and it's nothing. It's like a staircase to nowhere. Everything's boarded up. And I touch the ceiling, or I touch where it's boarded up. I touch that, and it's almost like lightning, going down into my body. Like I felt, it was just one of those moments where I'm not gonna say a demon, but maybe it was a demon. And I call my mom into the room, and I show her the staircase, and she looks at me, and I'm like, "We need to get out of here." And so we leave. We're walking out. The realtor's like, "Oh, well, what'd you think?" And my mom's trying to be all gracious and stuff. And I look at the realtor and I go to shake her hand, and like, you do that thing where you go to shake someone's hand, you kind of pull them in close so you can talk to them, and they can't really hear what you're saying. Anyone else can hear what you're saying. And I kind of whisper in her ear, I'm like, "You need to get out of here. Like something terrible happened in this house." I got visions of a woman. I got visions of like, an axe. It was like a disgruntled girl with an axe, and she killed her parents, and it felt like it was the location of a very grisly murder from maybe like the 1800s or something, because old house. And as she like pulled her hand away really quickly, like like I had just I shocked her too much, and she looked at me like I was crazy, which you get that a lot when you're psychic. Sometimes people are very reluctant to say to understand the messages. And she just brushed it off. So we go look at other houses. A week later, I am doing a tarot reading to myself, because sometimes you got to do little tune-ups. So I'm reading my own tarot cards, just kind of see what's going on. These are the cards I've had my entire life, and I'm putting down the cards, and I just get this like flash of this real estate agent, and I feel so weird. And so I told my mom, I'm like, "Oh, do you have the card of this lady still?" She goes, "Yeah." I give her a call, and she's talking to me, and turns out that house collapsed. That house collapsed, and she was barely able to get out. And I guess it was like she told me that she had remembered what I said, that like she had to get out, and she was trying to like push it out of her mind, but she was shown it one day, and the whole thing collapsed. Turns out what I had said was true, and there was a very, very like dark spirit, very dark entity there, and that was a message that I had picked up on. And so I felt like I was able to save her life in that way.
So you mentioned these tarot cards. Is that something you still do? Do you use tarot cards for readings, or?
I use them for readings. I use them on other people, myself. Sometimes I'll just, like I said, it's like you give yourself a little tune-up. Sometimes like somebody have a hard time figuring out the answer to a question, or figuring out what message it is. Like you throw down a few cards, it helps you focus a little bit. It's almost like a visual aid.
Interesting. So I think you can probably tell what I'm heading toward. Would you be able to do a reading for myself or Dr. Semor?
Absolutely.
Wow. So I have to kind of mentally prepare for that myself. Why don't we take a quick break? You can shuffle your tarot cards if that's what you do. I'm not entirely sure. We'll take a quick break and be right back with a real, true, factual tarot card reading. We're back after another short break on Real True Facts this week. Now it is time for well, it won't be live to you, but it's live for us. We will not edit this and redo it or anything like that. This is a one-shot deal. Our very own Nancy Drew doing a reading for Nancy. You said, are you going to do myself or Dr. Semor?
Let's do Dr. Semor. He's very enigmatic.
Okay, so let's do this then. I'll step out of the way because I'm not even sure if there's anything for me to facilitate. Yeah. But go ahead, Nancy.
What do you need from me? Yeah, I cut you off there.
No. All I need from you is to have an open heart, to allow yourself to receive messages. I know as a man of science, sometimes it is very hard to accept things that you can't prove. So, a lot of it's taken on faith, but, I'm here to tell you that everything is true in this way. So, stay open, have a question in mind, either about yourself or your future, anything that you would like to know. And I'll put down a few cards and I'll just tell you a few things, and hopefully it answers your questions. Now, I will say this is my deck from Natural Wonders from 1998 that I've been carrying forever. And so the significance of this deck is that it is very in tune with myself and my energies. I am the only person who has ever used this deck in this entire time. So, like I said with my story about the real estate agent, I believe wholeheartedly that the messages I get from these cards have the ability to save your life.
Wow. Awesome.
So I guess just think about something that you need an answer to, and we'll try and answer it. So I'm going to put down some cards here. Now, these aren't normal cards. These are almost Egyptian themed, and so we've got 3 here. I'll start with the center card because that would be the one that describes you. So it is called the trial card, and it has a picture of a bird and a picture of a fox on there, and the fox is looking at the bird. We also have a card to the left, which would indicate something that happened in your past, and then we have a card to the right that would indicate your future. So the card on the left is called the star, and it's a very bright pink star. And then we have the one on the right is called Janus, and so it's like the Greek god with the 2 faces. And that one is inverted, which means that it's upside down, so it has a different meaning. So we have the trial in the middle. So to me, that would indicate that there is someone in your life that you can't trust, or you have suspicions about. Those suspicions are true.
Oh, wow.
I'm not going to say you can't trust anyone, but be very careful with who you trust, especially people you know, because sometimes you can't trust people you know either. So it's okay to be skeptical. It's okay to question things, because it will come in handy. It will keep you safe. So if something seems off, chances are it is. So trust your instincts, and it will help you go far. The star card on the left here would indicate that you have been very prosperous in your past, that you have come a long way by being a very positive person, and keep doing that. Keep being positive. I see a lot of money. I see you being a very wealthy individual. I know you're in the market for a new microscope, and those aren't cheap. So maybe buy two if you can swing it. And then on the right, we've got the Janus card, which is the god with two faces, indicating that there'll be a couple decisions you'll have to make. And they might be difficult decisions. They might be easy decisions. It could be both. Just weigh your options, be scientific in everything that you do, and use logic. Yeah.
With my limited experience with tarot card readings has been from television and movies. As a very skeptical person, and often you see the subject of the reading being much more interactive than I was being, and I was just trying to sit back as an observer there with obviously something in mind as I was instructed, and I cannot communicate. I can't really express how dead on that reading was and how it felt like you were just reading straight into the emotions I was feeling as I'm at a turning point in my research and trying to figure out if it is time, in fact, to bring in a new consultant to help with my research. We are at the point where we can afford to bring more staff on, but I'm just skeptical of the outside people coming in at a time that we are finding so much success and so many breakthroughs. And for you, in your bunker, so far from me in my bunker, even having idea of my current area of research, to read all of that. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I can say yes. It is definitely time to bring in a larger staff, but be careful who you bring in. You're not going to be able to trust any of those people. There's always going to be that, younger hotshot scientist that's going to feel like they know everything. And I feel like you're going to be able to spot that person because you used to be that way. It's like looking in a mirror. So because you have that experiences, you will be able to spot that person and weed them out. But because there's always two sides to it, maybe that person becomes your biggest ally. Maybe it's two sides of the same coin, and you need that hot shot to kind of open up new research possibilities. So that's kind of what I'm getting, because you have your trial here, which, science experiments, there's always trials. There's always two sides of things. You have your control group, you have your variable group, and you're going to be successful. But I'm telling you, trust no one.
Oh, thank you. That advice and that clairvoyance and clarity couldn't come at a more important time in my life.
See, that's the feeling I'm getting. I'm getting a lot of images of like beakers. I'm getting a lot of images of people shaking hands, and you're all wearing safety goggles, and you're cheering like you found something huge, and then like in the background I see like someone else kind of like dawdling away on a clipboard being like, yeah, okay, we'll see. Watch out for that person. But that person could also be your biggest ally, but it also could be you. So
wow, you can't make this kind of stuff up. This, and also that's, I imagine that's good advice for his situation. And there are some kernels of truth for everyone in there. I can
see it playing out in front of me. And it's exactly like that,
Okay, so yeah, we're going to get wrap things up and do our traditional listener mail. Dr. Semor, thank you for being her guinea pig.
I hope he's okay. I feel like sometimes I rock people's worlds a little bit.
No, that was so amazing, so timely, so insightful. So for you to be able to do that, and the earlier demonstration with stone, with just the simple drawings and all that, it's just you've really opened my eyes and helped me professionally as well.
Thank you.
Wow. So, thanks again, Dr. Semor, for assisting me in conducting this interview of our very own Nancy Drew. And Nancy, viewer mail, what do we have this week?
We've got one that is aliens.
Aliens.
I guess it's anonymous. They didn't sign their name, which is okay. It says, aliens, good alien episode, need to go deeper. The truth is out there. I agree 100%. We will go deeper into the truth. I mean, the episode we did on aliens, I consider that a part one of a very long multi-part series on aliens themselves.
So and that email wasn't signed by anyone? It just said need to go deeper. Good. It's a good alien episode. Need to go deeper. The truth is out there. Wow. So it sounds like this person might know a little bit more than they're letting on.
Hey, and we are always here to dig deeper. Let's see.
And for other folks, so for maybe our new listeners, we have an email address where people can write to us, correct?
Yeah, our email address is realtruthfactsmail@gmail.com. Also, you can contact us on our Instagram as well. Real True Facts is at Real True Facts Graham, and that's on Instagram. You can always DM us there.
Okay.
They can do that. Let's see, Bigfoot. This email says Bigfoot Ep. I just got done bawling my eyes out from your Bigfoot episode.
Wow.
I know, so beautiful. I wish everyone had that much love in the world. We do too. I think Ranger Steve Littles did a wonderful job really connecting us with a world that we need to learn more about.
I'm glad, and that's just one more of those emails, communications that lets us know that we're making a difference, and that's important to me.
Yeah, connecting humans. This one's a little weird. It says, "Please don't respond." That's the subject line. Please don't respond. Don't worry, we weren't going to.
That's weird.
Please discuss lizard people. Can't say anymore. Be careful.
Whoa.
Wow.
Okay, that's pretty bold.
It is, yeah.
I think we'll have to address this in the future, won't we?
We will.
So
be careful. Yeah, I mean, thank God we're underground.
So let's make a note of that and circle back.
Lizard people. I mean, we've got clones that we're going to do next week, and then we'll line up lizard people. But we'll have to be very careful. Apparently
we're apparently we're stepping on some toes here of the powerful and rich and powerful.
Well, and it's funny because I've got the predictive text with the email, and it's like it pre-writes responses. It's like, okay, I will. Thanks, I will. No, I won't. Well, I'm not going to say any of that stuff. Like
because don't respond.
Thank you. Yeah, I will do that. No, I won't.
I won't be careful. No,
we don't respond to any of our emails anyway. So,
right, we have to. It's a safety precaution.
So man, I just want to say thank you for having me on the show this week. Hopefully you're able to get a better understanding of psychics and what we do. I know at times you kind of just have to take a leap there and fill in the blanks yourself. But I appreciate that you all trusted me to be the one to get to the real truth behind all these things and to do that on the show.
Yeah, I think it was a good experiment, and and let us, you listeners out there, let us know how you feel. Follow us on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify. Leave us a rating when you get the chance, and tell your friends. We want to stay in the business of information and making sure you all stay informed. So, smash that like button.
We're even on YouTube if you want to go that route. So and also thank you to you, Stone. I appreciate that all, and thank you to Dr. Semor this week, kind of stepping into a role that he wasn't familiar with. So I think we all learned something very valuable today, and hopefully it opened more people's eyes to the truth. The real truth behind psychic stuff.
Yes, I learned a lot. I'm still trying to figure out your tricks when it came to my my drawings and words and your tarot card reading. So I'll be racking my brain on that for a little while now.
Well, a magician never reveals the secrets. So yeah, we will. I think that'll be all for us today. We will say thanks again. Thank you to all of our dear listeners. Please tune in next week. We'll be talking about clones and how you might be able to figure out if you yourself are a clone. Be sure to give us a like. Send us an email if you want to, and we can't do it without you. Thank you so much, and remember, just because you hear about it or read it doesn't mean it's true. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on Real True Facts.